Money FM 89.3, the best of Saturday mornings. International News Review.
Welcome back to the International News Review. Steve Okun joining us, as always, the CEO of APAC Advisors. Steve, Tariff Day has come and passed yesterday. What's happening across Asia with the tariffs announced by the Trump administration?
You know, I have a lot of friends who are providing analysis on TV and radio and on LinkedIn, and they're saying, well, you know, who are the winners and who are the losers with Trump's tariffs? And I just got to say, stop. This is insane. There are nothing but losers that are coming out of these tariffs. Now, there's immediate losers and there's eventual losers, but everyone is going to be a loser. And
some are losing more than others.
Well,
right?
Everybody's going to lose a lot eventually. And let's just look at Singapore. You know, everyone's, Singapore, this is great. Singapore's only got a 10% tariff, even though it has a free trade agreement with the United States, and it should be zero. And look at Malaysia and Thailand and, and Cambodia, and they're all in 19 or 20%. Look, Singapore is going to get rocked, even though it's only at 10%, because Singapore is a trading nation. Global trade is going to take a hit because of this change in the global trading system that Trump is forcing on everyone. Everyone is a loser on this. It's just going to be how quickly and do you have the ability to try and mitigate these losses? And a few will find opportunity, and boy, you better start looking for that now.
Look at Southeast Asia, Philippines, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Indonesia, Cambodia. A lot of these economies, you know, the economy, their very model is built on exports. Why has he hit ASEAN so hard?
Again, Neil, that's just, it's a good question, but it's the wrong question. He doesn't think about ASEAN when it comes to tariffs. He doesn't think, are you an ally of mine like Japan? He doesn't think, are you a key trading partner like Singapore? He just says, from an America First trade policy, I look at every single country one-on-one. And you know what happens when I look at a country one-on-one? I can dominate that country because the U.S. has more leverage over every single country in the world than anybody else. It's why he moves away from a multilateral or plurilateral system to a country-by-country system. It has nothing to do with who you are or where you are. It has nothing to do with ASEAN or Southeast Asia. He is going to use all the leverage he can, and that's why you end up with numbers like 19% or 20%. Singapore, the only one here that's at the base level of 10%. Doesn't matter where you are.
But could this all change again? Because there's still a lot of things up in the air. China's still got to be settled. Other countries have got to be settled. Some tariffs have been delayed, 90 days, 60 days, whatever the latest is, depending on territory. Still up in the air.
Well, it is going to change, and it is going to get even worse. That is what is going to happen, and it's going to happen for, let's just do three quick reasons so we don't do the entire session on trade. One is the United States has now eliminated de minimis. That means that every package going to the United States now has to pay tariffs, and it now has to go through complex customs clearance.
That's huge, by the way.
If you're an SME, you now are going to get hit when your business model was, my shipments are under $800. I don't have to deal with all of this complexity and cost.
So this rule that was forever, and I think most Americans have no idea about this, but this de minimis rule basically stated if your incoming shipment is worth less than $800, you don't pay any tax or anything. No, it could be clothing from Shein, or it could be parts for, like you say, a small business or whatever. But now that goes away so that any cost of anything coming into somebody in the U.S. will be charged a tariff.
Not just Americans. It's going to affect everybody. Everybody who's sending stuff to America.
Well, the receiver would theoretically pay, right?
Well, the receiver is going to pay, but some of that either they're just not going to take your business anymore.
Exactly.
So you could have an export business to the U.S. that now goes away because you're now too expensive. Look, this needed to change. When de minimis was put in place, companies like Shein did not use it like it is used. This is being used. I'm not going to say abused, because everything that the Sheins and the Timus did of the world was legal. But they took advantage of a system that was not designed for them. De minimis needed to be reformed, but to eliminate it entirely. And it was supposed to be eliminated to pay for the tax cuts coming in 2027. Now, Trump is eliminating it at the end of this month. Businesses are going to get slammed.
There's no time to adjust, right? Yeah.
No time. So de minimis are coming. We have more tariffs coming on national security, and Singapore has got to focus on if they're going to get slammed on semiconductors or pharmaceutical/healthcare, and God knows how broad that is going to be. And then there's this whole issue of what the Trump administration is calling transshipments, and that is your supply chain exposed to China, potentially through investment or through shipments, and of course, all of Southeast Asia's. So, Neil, to your question, is this going to change? 100% it's going to change. 100% it's going to get more complicated and more costly.
I have the existential question, as always, why? Just to pick one unbelievable example, Australia, still 10%. New Zealand has been raised from 10% to 15%. No one in either country can work out why New Zealand has to pay 15% and Australia has to pay 10%.
And Kazakhstan, 25%.
Yeah, but these are next door neighbours. But the point is,
Right.
Why? How are these percentages determined? I mean, is there any logic applied at all?
No, there really is no logic beyond the logic of the United States is, and this is, the Trump America First logic. The United States has huge trade deficits, and from their perspective, those are per se an emergency that they have to deal with. The second is that the United States has lost too many manufacturing jobs over the course of the last 50 years, give or take. And the way to bring manufacturing home and the way to eliminate trade imbalances is to hit everybody with tariffs. Now, there should be some logic as to what the tariff amount would be. Why Cambodia?
And which industry, right?
Yeah, of course. Well,
I mean, you're not going to start making clothing again in the U.S., like T-shirts and stuff. That's never coming back.
Glenn,
or cheap plastic toys, right? And
Glenn, you're starting to talk nonsense.
I've been talking nonsense all my life, Steve.
Of course you're right.
This is nothing different.
Of course you're right.
Yeah.
But at least you should say, well, why is Cambodia at 19% and Laos at 40%?
Yeah,
that makes no sense. But now, if you wanted to get into it, should there be tariffs on certain goods in certain countries
that are strategic or whatever?
Look,
Yeah.
and certainly we've talked about Chinese electric vehicles as case in point. Yes, they should be tariffed, and they are being tariffed. They're being tariffed by everybody, the Americans and the Europeans and the Brazilians and the Indians. Yes, you should have tariffs on certain sectors out of certain countries when there is a very specific reason for doing so, like you are dealing in an unlevel playing field because of the state subsidies that have gone to a sector from a country. Yes, tariffs can make sense. The way they're doing it now, where it makes no sense to try and figure out what the tariff rate is for a country, let alone ignoring being strategic in having your tariffs. Yeah, that's been out the window for
looking
the
at the pushback, the potential pushback, right? It was in the news yesterday. Got a weakness in the job market. Yesterday's monthly report from the U.S. Department of Labor. There's real risks on these policies, right? Economists have warned for months this is going to affect the economy, businesses, consumers, hiring, sales, investment will slow. There was a survey done yesterday. It was a small sample size, admittedly. I think it was 6 out of 10 Americans are not comfortable with what Trump is doing to the economy. Will this cut through to his MAGA base?
It will, and the question is when, and will it cut through before the midterm elections that is going to force this market guardrail to kick in? Everybody talks about taco. Trump always chickens out. These tariffs cannot last, and the way they're being implemented cannot last, and the political pain will eventually catch up to Trump. The question is when and how much damage will have been done, and will his party finally say, we're going to get wiped out in the midterms if you keep this up? We've got to stop and find some solution to this. But Neil, there's no question we are not going to have this level of tariffs with this level of arbitrary application of them. But when will countries stick up for themselves? China has done so. No other country really has. Will countries start to stick up for themselves? Then we'll see. But it's going to be a very painful process until that happens.
I want to close off our tariff talk today with a quote from our good friend Dr. Deborah Elms from the Hinrich Foundation. She was talking to the BBC yesterday about the tariffs, and her quote was, "It's worth noting that the rates announced today, meaning yesterday, are not final." Points out Deborah. Executive orders say that the president reserves the right to change them, to modify them based on conversations or changing events. So basically, throw your hands up in the air, put your finger in the wind, and see which way it's going to blow next.
Exactly.
And that's the issue. And Neil, you get to the key word. Businesses, investors need certainty. And there is absolutely no certainty when it comes to Trump's tariffs. None.
All right, let's move on to Gaza. American allies are now breaking with Trump to force a diplomatic shift on Gaza. Canada has joined France and the UK, announcing its plan to recognize a Palestinian state. Some of these countries are now talking that Israel is guilty of genocide in the starvation of folks in Gaza. How big of a deal is this evolving shift against the U.S. policy, Steve?
Well, I do see that the Cambodians have nominated Donald Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize.
So he's got that going.
He's got that going from Thailand and Cambodia,
which is nice.
Well, hey, smart play by Cambodia. Of course, but the real issue, of course, is this issue. Obviously, it's Russia, Ukraine, and it's Gaza, Israel, and Trump has done basically nothing on either of those. You could certainly argue that Trump has increased the amount of suffering in Ukraine and has increased the amount of suffering in Gaza by not using any influence on Israel to stop this starvation. It has now gotten so bad that Trump has said he is now working on a plan to get people fed in Gaza. And he said, we want to get people fed. It is something that should have happened a long time ago. It is something that should have happened a long time ago. It's something the United States should have been focused on a long time ago. And it's about time that the U.S. can put its pressure on Israel to do something to help people in Gaza. And it looks like that is going to happen. Obviously, better late than never, but really late.
Well, that is the key. Glenn and I have been saying...
Better not late at all, quite honestly, right?
We've been on this show for a long time, Steve, saying that the U.S. policies towards Israel have been dubious at best. This is not an overnight thing. This enforced starvation of babies and children, eyewitness reports, BBC reporters on the ground, seeing snipers shooting at children, trying to get food, using them for target practice. We've got famous Jewish academics now calling this a genocide. Does the U.S., and Trump specifically, risk standing on the wrong side of history?
I don't think Trump cares. But
he represents. He is the president of the United States.
What Trump has said is that even in this situation, he blames Hamas for stealing and then selling the aid that has been entering the enclave, and then that is what has allowed Hamas to stay in power, and that is what, of course, started this whole thing back on October 7th when Hamas invaded Israel and killed and raped all of those Israelis. And so now the question, though, is, where should you have drawn this line of making sure, from an Israeli perspective, that they could be safe as a country, that they could live in peace, but not allow this to happen? And clearly this line of wherever it was, and there was a line somewhere, has been bulldozed by Netanyahu, and the United States should have stepped in earlier. And now you're seeing Canada and France and the UK coming in saying, because of this, we now need to recognize a Palestinian state. The U.S. is not there. The U.S. still has no plans, long-term plan for Gaza's future. But at least there's a recognition now by Trump that you've got to address the humanitarian crisis that is happening there.
Yes, but why is it taking so long?
Because because this is a really difficult part of the world.
It's not difficult, Steve.
No,
I've got to push back on this.
It is.
Genocide is not difficult. You're either pro or anti-genocide.
Okay,
we're way past the Hamas October the 7th thing now. We're 60,000 plus deaths down the line. We've got women, children and babies being shot at, and we're still invoking October the 7th. No one is disputing the horrors of that day. We're way past that now.
I'm going to disagree with you on the word genocide. That's very different of an issue. But what is happening now has got to stop. And everybody is in agreement on that. And why is this taking so long? And that is because the United States, when the Biden administration left, the United States was trying to push a plan for what do you do in Gaza when you get to the point that you have to transition from that military action to finding some type of solution. And the Trump administration dropped that plan, never had a plan, still does not have a plan as to what's happening. Their one big plan, right, was that that the U.S. Would take over Gaza and build a Riviera on the Middle East. That nonsense has been stopped. But no, they need to come up with a long-term plan. The Europeans are now trying to fill the void that Trump has left, and that's where we are right now.
Yeah. All right, we got to move on from that to our final story. YouTube will now be included in Australia's world first social media ban for children under 16 after the government ditched a previous exemption for the platform. All right, so this is the site is set to be excluded from the ban, which will limit TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, and Snapchat. That is due to start in December. Is this the beginning of a trend that we will see? Already nations around the world, including Scandinavia, are looking to see how this is implemented and what happens with it. Is YouTube actually social media?
That's the question, right? I think everyone will have an agreement that social media can be harmful for children and that the government needs to step in to prevent social harm from happening on social media to children. The question here is whether YouTube is social media. Is YouTube different than TikTok and X and Facebook? And that is the question. The Australians,
by the way, no kids are on Facebook anyway. I'm not even sure why they have that ban in there, but okay.
Well, the Australians have flipped on this. The Australians were initially saying that you could watch YouTube because it wasn't that type of interactive platform, and they have now flipped on it, and they said that YouTube is banned along with the others because this is the platform where children aged 10 to 15, according to the Australians' e-safety commissioner, saw the most harmful content.
I think it comes from a good place, but is it genuinely enforceable? Number one, you impose an age limit. There's a million ways you can get around that. And number two, I'm not entirely sure that, as to Glenn's point, lumping YouTube into the same category as TikTok and X is even fair. And I'm not a big advocate for YouTube, but YouTube is also a place where students go to look at history films and informational clips and general knowledge and wildlife and so on.
It's not banning YouTube from the kids under 16. It's banning them from having an account. So they can go and watch all of those videos that you just mentioned. None of that.
So the change will be negligible.
No, none of that is being banned. When you can then go, when you are now logged in, then the algorithms start targeting things at you, and that is where they're worried about it. It's also where you can get into the comments and you can post things, and then somebody can post and find you and then get into a session with you offline. That's the issue that they're worried about. And that's why they have decided to ban them, because the Aussies say this is the most frequent platform, and that 37% of children surveyed reported seeing harmful content on YouTube. Now, what's interesting, of course, is TikTok is coming in and saying the same argument you just made, Neil. Well, TikTok is an educational tool. And their ads say, from fishing to chef skills, Aussie teens are learning something new every day on TikTok.
Again, I'm not an advocate for TikTok, but it can be.
It's not that. It's being on a member there and getting those algorithms targeting you, and you don't get targeted, I am sure, phishing skills from these platforms. And I think it's relatively laughable for TikTok to make that argument.
The other kind of phishing skills.
Right?
I think TikTok's strategy here is genius, because if TikTok is, which clearly is who you are aiming this law at, saying, well, YouTube's no different than us, then that gets YouTube banned just like it gets TikTok banned.
Well, Australia's Safety Commissioner Julie Inman Grant last month recommended this happening. In her words, YouTube is the most frequently cited platform where children ages 10 to 15 years old have seen harmful content. I just don't know how this actually gets to the root of that problem. Okay, they don't have to sign in, but they're still going to be able to see harmful content.
Well, yeah,
you know what I mean?
You're never going to be able to ban that, but you can ban them being targeted with harmful content. You can ban people finding them and doing that. Hey, look, and YouTube, which of course is part of Google, went all out on this. Who do you think they brought in to lobby on their behalf? The most important Australians in the world they brought in. The Wiggles.
Oh, there you go.
Wiggles. Even
go.
the Wiggles could not convince the Australian government. And the Aussie said, hey, look, this is a treasured Australian institution, but I'm not going to be swayed by Jeff and Greg and Anthony. Boy, I'm going to blank on the last one, because I watched more Wiggles with Bennett than I can remember.
You can mess with Australians on many things. Do not mess with their Wiggles. Do not take the Wiggles away from Australian parents on YouTube. It's not happening.
But even the Wiggles couldn't convince the Australian government. And if the Wiggles couldn't convince the Australian government that YouTube is not social media, I think it's over for YouTube in terms of winning this argument.
There we go. All right, Steve, thanks so much. We're going to leave it there today. Next Saturday, we are all off.
Happy SG60, everybody.
Enjoy your National Day weekend. And everybody else, we'll be back the following week.
See you on the 16th.
Great to see you.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.